When 9/11 first occurred, it sent a wave of shock and horror throughout the United States. More than a century later, while some may view it as a bitter memory, others use it as justification for unwarranted and immense amounts of Islamophobia in America. Hi, I'm Davis Fisher, and this is my friend Misael Aguilar. Today, we will be discussing why and how Islamophobia is so abundant in today's social climate. One impact of 9/11 on America was that it gave basis to a large amount of fear-mongering. This kind of fear-mongering is incredibly damaging towards Muslim Americans because it's mostly speculation without much basis. For instance, the claim that Muslim Americans are in the process of installing Sharia law into America's government. Another example can be seen in this quote from a Christian radio show, Focus on Family, in which Boykin, a former American general and firm believer in the installment of Sharia law in America, explains why he considers Muslims Americans a problem. Quote, "Let me say, I have 6 grandchildren and 3 of them are females, and I must tell you I am greatly concerned about the day coming where they will be wearing burqas. That is how serious I consider this threat." Looking at the demographic of this Christian radio show, it's not hard to predict how this threat will be perceived by the audience. For this reason, this statement is fear-mongering. It's playing into the subliminal fears that one listening might have and validating them. The most frustrating part is that most of, if not all, of these kinds of statements are not backed by empirical evidence. In this particular instance, the co-hosts of the show, instead of asking for relevant statistics or, evidence supporting the aforementioned claim, they keep the idea afloat by stating, "We simply cannot stick our heads in the sand." This refers to the idea that they should not be turning a blind eye to the idea that in 10 years in the future, it'll be a legal requirement to wear a burqa. Which is equivalent to refusing to disarm a bomb just because it hasn't blown up yet. But, this is pretty small scale. It's just this radio show. In fact, I haven't even heard about it before I did my research. And I'm willing to guess that you haven't either. At least it's not in our government, Donald Trump is probably one of the most obvious perpetrators of Islamophobia, judging that it was a large part of his campaign, and one of his first moves as president was the travel ban. To quote Marina Poudre of Fordham University, quote, Trump's, anti-Muslim speech validates the internal fear and hateful sentiments certain groups of Americans have been feeling post-terrorist attacks. Instead of meditating the fear and confusion of Americans, Trump fuels them, end quote. Putting yourself into the shoes of Muslim Americans, viewing these kinds of actions, it's only imaginable how nervous or scared one might be having the face of your country that you live in actively rooting against you.
Due to this kind of behavior towards Muslim Americans, it has become increasingly difficult for them to live a comfortable life. According to a quote from Yvonne Haddad of Georgetown University, some American Muslims reported that 9/11 introduced an era of intensified suspicion about Islam and Muslims on the part of non-Muslim neighbors, colleagues, classmates, and friends. The increase in hostility towards Islam and Muslims by security officials appears to have direct impact on the faith and practice of Islam in the U.S. Due to 9/11, Muslim Americans are often singled out and harassed by security officials to the point where it is becoming harder to practice their religion. It's fair to say that the suspicion in general was warranted, but it was too far accurately narrowed on the Muslim Americans. More bluntly, many cannot accept that the same person can be simultaneously a practicing Muslim and a good, loyal American. While having a government being biased against you can be unnerving enough, it doesn't end there. Rhonda Atawi, a visiting scholar at the UC Berkeley Islamophobia Research and Documentation Project and PhD graduate in social sciences at Western Sydney University in Australia, explains the effects of more noticeable instances of Islamophobia. In this quote, since 9/11, personal attacks, hate crimes, racial slurs, and discrimination in the public sphere have made it increasingly difficult for Muslims to access or even locate safe spaces, particularly for visible Muslims. It's this kind of day-to-day discrimination that makes it near impossible for a Muslim American to live comfortably in today's social climate. Muslims, or even those who appear Muslims, are constantly being harassed with Islamophobic phrases and in extreme cases being faced with actual assaults and violence, all of which stems from the anger towards them after the events of 9/11. Imagine being hated for something that you had no part of or say in. The behavior is not acceptable nor warranted. While this Islamophobia may not be the most noticeable thing right now, looking around, it certainly will be soon with the way things are looking. In another quote from Atawi, she spits some hard facts. In the United States, the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, annual census of hate groups and extremist organizations reported a 67% increase in Islamophobic hate crimes in 2015, and the number of anti-Muslim hate groups has tripled since Trump's election. The Council for American-Islamic Relations reported a 57% increase in anti-Muslim incidents in 2016, as well as a 44% increase in anti-Muslim hate crimes during the same period. There has undoubtedly been an increase in Islamic hate crimes and anti-Muslim hate groups in America, most likely due to the nature of Trump's campaign, using the fear of Muslims as a ladder to the top of the polls. This kind of fear-mongering inevitably leads to these kind of results. If these statistics aren't enough to convince you of the danger that Muslim Americans are facing, maybe this quote from Atawi will. The tangible impact of this hostile political climate is perhaps best captured in the arson that destroyed the Islamic Center of Victoria, Texas, only hours after Trump administration announced the first executive order, suspending travel from 7 Muslim-majority countries. Arson of an Islamic establishment hours after the travel ban, of which ties to the anti-Islam ideology should be apparent. The actions of the government played a huge role in the actions of citizens of the U.S. If an anti-Muslim law is passed, then it instantly validates the ideas of those willing to commit arson against those they hate.
If you are still one that believes that anti-Islamic mindset is justified due to the action of Muslim Americans, I want to present to you a statistic from David Belt which states, quote, "Data is readily available to show that of the 150,000 murders in the U.S. of the post-9 American decade, only 11 came at the hands of Muslim Americans, and virtually no Muslims were involved in the 1,400,000 violent crimes or almost 100,000 foreseeable rapes in the U.S. that took place each year." So it's clear that Muslim Americans are not an active threat inside of America. If that still isn't enough to convince you, I have a quote from Yvonne Hadid. In 2010, Qasim Rashid, an American Muslim writer, in an article in the religious section of the Huffington Post, responded to an email he had received, which asked, "Are Muslim Americans even allowed to be loyal to the United States?" Rashid's reply reflects the latest trend in American Muslim attitudes. For a Muslim, loyalty to the United States is not simply lip service, but a fundamental requirement of faith, because America recognizes the equality of its citizens regardless of background and champions a universal freedom of religion. There are many people that believe Islam is in direct opposition of America, and this cannot be further from the truth because, like Rashid explains, Islam is as faithful to America as it is to God. This is because America recognizes the freedom of religion. When thinking of Islam, most Americans would immediately jump to the more extremist portions of the religion. And as we know, extremists are not the same as the majority of any religion. For example, if every religion was equivalent to their extremists, then all Christians would be cross-burning, pointy hood-wearing bad people.
In conclusion, 9/11 sparked a new age of fear-mongering spread through political figures and other sources of media like the radio and the news, which through the repeated validation of irrational fears directed toward Muslim Americans lead to the spread of Islamophobia. This Islamophobia, which was grown in popularity and backing both politically and socially, has led to the increase in much rougher and unsafe living conditions for Muslim Americans, such as a higher instances of hate crimes and an increased amount of anti-Muslim hate groups. It's clear to see Islamophobia is present in America and causing real harm. If any of this has spoke to you and you want to help, I recommend donating to CARE or Council on American Islamic Relations at www.care.com, spelled CAIR.com. They are a civil rights advocacy group that is fighting the rise of Islamophobia in America. My name is Davis Fisher, and thanks for listening. Political? That's political.
It's political. Political is not a word.